And we are back at it with another replay review for our fellow dojo trainee Amy, aka Valkyra. And this time we will take a look how she actually performs on Arctic Refuge. Or Refuge, sorry. So, her opponent is someone called Yara, who's like half her rating, so I expect Amy to win this game. We will see if this is gonna happen. So we have Amy up here, and I will probably just say Amy and not Valkyra, so don't get confused by me doing this. So on this map you can tell you have a bunch of tree groups. As you might already know, like if there's these green dots and they actually result from me using a UI mod. Usually you would see some indicator that those are worth 10 mass apiece. In order to get a very clean look, the UI reclaim thingy just cuts short on showing the reclaim labels here for everything that's worth 10 mass apiece. So whenever you see on my screen that something is just labeled green here, it's usually worth 10 mass apiece. Alright, so we have some reclaim around our base. Technically these are very good tree groups, so they give you both mass and energy. And you want to utilize this early on, specifically in the area around your base, say this part of the map, to boost your initial base build, so you can actually have some engineers reclaiming in this area. Technically you want to don't do too many engineers reclaiming in the beginning, because then you don't have any build power in your base. So, but right now we definitely need to reclaim in order to not mass stall. As we perfectly can see here, Amy is utilizing the reclaim to actually build her base. So, but we need to be aware that we need to queue more engineers to the base soon, probably. The more maxes we expand, the more mass we're gonna have, so we gotta spend it properly. So what she's doing better than in the last game I've reviewed is, for example, keeping the engineers here close to the tank, the raiding group close to the engineers. Same goes here. So we're kind of protecting our own expansion from getting raided. And now we need to keep spending the mass. It's a 10 by 10 map, so again, on this kind of size of map, you want to eventually tech and eco up. With anything, say, smaller than 10 by 10, you might get away with just building T1 and even probably with just building land if you want to. Although an air factory comes in handy to actually scout and see where you can engage, especially. So there's like one thing on this map, there's enemy civilians on this, so you don't want to walk into those PDs, so you want to send an early artillery to deal with those, kinda, to get the reclaim, because the buildings are usually more mass than the actual tree groups. So that you want to kinda consider getting early, and those are T2 P-gens. So, but you don't want to walk into the PD with your comm, for example, because then the comm will be down to like, say, half HP, kinda. Depends a bit on what you do. And if you have access to overcharge. This early, you usually don't have access to overcharge, so yeah, you're just gonna suffer. So, we are still spending our mass kinda okay-ish. Let's see what the enemy is doing. Enemy is building factories as well. So right now the enemy has almost finished their 5th factory. And we are only about to finish our 4th factory, which tells us that we could have utilized our reclaim around our base better and kept more build power in our base, which means we are currently a bit slower than our opponent. And we're currently overbuilding energy, so we could just build more factories right away without building more energy. So Amy is kind of playing it safe here by building a bit more energy than she needs right now. But that could eventually lead to the fact that she could be behind on the amount of units in the end. Expansion is kind of looking okay for Amy. I can see that a bunch of engineers are reclaiming here. So she's using a technique which is called the factory attack move. So basically you just use Alt and right click somewhere to attack move out of the factory. if you select a tank and engineer right now, the build range that you see here being showcased in orange is usually even the reclaim, as well the reclaim range, and you can see they're reclaiming outside of this range, which actually comes from the factory attack move. If I select the factory, this actually doubles the radius the engineer will reclaim, but it also actually changes the behavior of the attack order. So basically, if you just grab an engineer right now and alt right click towards here, they will start reclaiming here and end up reclaiming here. With the factory attack command, it is different. So basically, if you set the attack command to here, they will start, they will move to the end of the attack command and then have the double range. And then you can, like I just tried to do, I can't do this in a replay right now, but if you move the point around the ready point, they will even keep the double range if you put it somewhere else, so you don't technically need as many engineers. And as you can tell, Amy is using way too many engineers here and is now moving engineers back to the base because we're overflowing all our mass. So we're damn slow right now at expanding our base, which is a bit of a bummer because the start looked kinda okay-ish. Map expansion looks a bit better for Amy right now, given the fact she's moving her comm down here. Means she will just get those maxes as well. She has some tanks here. Factory is queued here already. Not yet here. So this engineer, technically commander, could already have a build command, build order to build those maxes. So she's gonna do that soon, hopefully. Meanwhile, our opponent is focusing on getting the reclaim in mid, kinda. And if we look at the reclaim values, you can tell that the enemy is doing way better at reclaiming. Even though they've just crushed the PD here. So they're already like 2.5 times ahead on reclaim. Everything in the base is kinda gone, while for Amy it's still there. Which is because Amy is just flowing her mass right now and not spending it. Otherwise she would have been way quicker. So basically we need a bit more energy right now and we need to spend our mass. We're building the max here right now, which is okay. So what I tell my trainees usually, if you have like a quad max like this, or if you had like, say, a triple max here, always build a factory, build a PD, and build a radar. So you secure this position and you can always reinforce from there. Even though, for example, if you lose this max, you can just simply build one engineer and re-expand the maxes. So you, on a 10x10 map, you want to do that. When you play like a 5x5 map that is like quarter the size, you don't want to do that. Then you want to keep basically all your factories in your base and rally everything out of your base. So Amy's picking good fights here. I don't feel like she's scouting enough and I don't see a lot of radars right now. In fact, the only radar I see is her in her base here. Which means we're just poking around, having no clue that we're gonna face a huge army here and we're probably gonna lose those tanks soonish. And we somehow forgot to play for the reclaim here, which is a bit of a bummer. As you can tell, there's like thousands of mass in this area here in mid. So we technically want to contest this for sure. If we go back to mass, we can tell that the enemy is probably e-stalling. Yes, because mass was kinda even earlier. So the enemy didn't properly prepare for getting the reclaim here, which means you want to build a little bit more energy to actually spend the mass you're getting from the reclaim. But, yeah. Not Amy's problem, but generally speaking, this is what you want to do. And again, Amy is just poking here. The problem is we're not scouting. We have a scout here. We could send it now to actually, I don't know, either side, either here or here, to determine if we can push. It's a nice arrow I drew here, I think. And then we gotta decide. So this is what Amy struggles with usually, is properly distributing units and not having them like in groups of like a third or fourth of her army. So technically you want to send troops to like the choke points of the map, kinda-ish. But you don't want to split them up too much. And like, we're scouting with an interceptor here now, which is okay. But we now need to actually utilize the intel we've gained and pull back. And we're too slow on expanding on our advantage here, you know. This factory needs to build engineers right now to grab all of this, or to grab reclaim here and expand maxes. We're just too slow on expanding here. And our com is standing in a PD for free. While we have arties in our mix and can just take out the PD with the arty without losing any 8 hit points here. So whenever you have the chance to utilize the artillery, you want to do that. And now we must not idle, we must crush this position. Problem is, we haven't built a single factory here, and therefore we cannot reinforce with engineers here to get the reclaim. So we gotta click it with our com now, actually. Probably not gonna happen. Meanwhile, the enemy is not very good at distributing engineers to reclaim piles. We've just clicked all our idle engineers in the base probably and sent them to one attack move. Gave them one attack move. We don't want to do that. So the enemy has reclaimed most of the stuff in mid, and we can now tell the difference. Enemy is still on half the reclaim, which is basically because the enemy didn't actually manage to play for one of the corners of the map. So enemy has access to more reclaim right now, but enemy is not properly utilizing it. Like this factory is going T2 now, which is okay if you have T2 and want to have a support factory, but yeah, now we finally start building engineers here. So this is like 5 minutes late. We have T2, which is good. We are on 50-ish income, that's fine. We're reclaiming here now, we're reclaiming here, that's good. We are way too late to mid, but the enemy just, I don't know, retreated, and we didn't consider building maxes, so enemy can probably steal some of the maxes here. And it's looking very good for him. Like, if we draw a line on the map, which map control the enemy has, let me redraw it, because basically this is not control. It's basically just this little piece of the map. So enemy has a heavy advantage right now, and just needs to utilize it. So we don't need to play very aggressively right now, because we've basically done our job at the T1 stage, which basically at the T1 stage is to get at least 50% map control, or at best more. Emi has done so Emi has achieved more than 50% map control, and now needs to reinforce everything with T2 to either maintain the control and finally crush with T3 if the enemy has something to fight with, or we just end the game with T2. Problem is, we're just pushing in now instead of sitting on our advantage here and getting all the reclaim here, and we decide we can engage even more, and we're using all our army. Like, raiding here in the back might be an okay idea, but we only want to do it with like a couple of tanks as a raiding group, and we want to keep the majority here to actually protect our commander. So this rally point, for example, should not be here, but the rally point should actually be somewhere, say, down here. Because we need reinforcements with our commander. Same here, we're still very slow. We've just attacked, moved here out of the factory. We didn't build any of the maxes here on the way. So basically we've pushed the enemy away from an area on the map, but we didn't capitalize on it by reclaiming or anything. I mean, we've built some maxes, which is fine, but we didn't fully capitalize on it. Let's put it that way. We're still very far ahead on eco, so we're like 2.5 times the eco or whatever, so at least 2 times. The problem is, I mean, lucky for Amy is basically that they might not have scouted their commander here, and therefore she might not die here. Maybe, we will see. So the issue for the enemy right now is, you can tell they're going for T3, which is, I mean, they don't have the eco for it, that's for sure. The other issue is they've only built land factories, so they can't properly scout now where Amy is. So this might actually be Amy's lifesaver here, that they didn't build an air factory, not a single one. So this would have been game here if Amy just had the comm here and they would have just moved in with everything they had. So let's see how Amy deals with the fact that they're gonna raid her base. Rally point has been moved a bit forward from here. Probably problem is we have like several waypoints for the factories. Some further ahead, some further in the back. Problem is again for Amy, we don't have any proper radar coverage. So we don't see it coming. So although we should, we know that we've lost some army here and we've lost all the maxes. So we need to respond and PD up our base to not lose the base probably. And that could even be T1 if you don't have access. I mean, If you need it quick, even T1 will help against blazes. That's not a problem. And all our rally points need to go here, and we need to protect our base now for now. But I don't see any PDs being built. Meanwhile, our T2 is idle here. The rally points are still everywhere but in our base to protect our base. We will probably win this because basically just the rhinos are better than the blazes in direct combat. And they only have some T1 reinforcements and they don't have any eco basically to punish Amy for anything here. So as long as she survives the attack, which she will, she should be fine and she should comfortably be winning the map. Like, again, this is a bummer. What you should do is, like, rally points here, then use the distribute orders command, so the engineers, like, say, getting these engineers and giving those orders to move here, holding shift, and then you can just attack, move towards here, and get the reclaim in the corner. And then the other engineers could be reclaiming towards the front line or whatever, so probably you don't need that many engineers. At some point maybe include some arties. You're still playing Cybrans so they can stun. Might be useful against Aeon, especially when the enemy is just building blazes. Might lead to the fact that you win the game even harder on the engagements. So, problem is we still don't have any clue what the enemy is doing. We still have only one T1 radar here and one here, so if we switch to the POV we can see that Amy sees basically nothing. So what we need to do right now is either get more radars up. Technically we should get more radars up. Probably a T2 radar here would be pretty decent to cover kinda this area of the map. So we see most of the engagements coming way ahead of time. And yeah. Like one T1 radar here, one T1 radar here, and she should be safe. And then like before we engage we wanna scout to see if we're gonna pick good fights and not bad fights like here. This might even be a good fight still for her, because the enemy only has flak here and has mobile missile launchers, as long as she doesn't just idle her stuff here. Which Amy is very likely to do, but this time Amy keeps moving. Okay, that's nice. So we're just gonna crush this little army here, because basically there's not a single direct fire unit in it, but just single Aurora. So this will just die to the rhinos now, for free. We finally started moving our engineers, but I don't know, we've randomly clicked stuff. Like maxes on the map instead of keeping reclaiming here, I don't know, it's strange. Same here, we didn't actually attack move the reclaim. And usually, even if you queue maxes like this, you want to follow up with a reclaim command, so they actually are busier after building the one thing they're supposed to build. At least, I mean, she's at least trying to re-expand, but it's gonna be very slow this way. Better way to re-expand stuff would be having a transport sitting in our base and actually loading up engineers on the transport and ferrying them across the map. That would be the quickest way. For example, if the enemy had not the comm down here, this would be the quickest way to re-expand those maxes here for her, because the closest factory to this position is kind of her main base. So ferrying engineers here would be the easiest method. I've noticed that Amy is going gun. I didn't mention it because it really doesn't matter at this stage, because the enemy has nothing. So the enemy, I mean, the enemy still has some maxes, so we need to keep raiding this instead of idling the huge army down here. We've rebuilt a T1 radar, we're not upgrading it, unfortunate. Enemy only has T1 radar as well, so they don't see anything either. But it's basically game over, and Amy is taking way too long to end this game, because she's on like 40 rhinos now and the enemy has got nothing. Enemy has basically 2 blazes, that's it. And some auroras. So basically we have like 35 tanks more than the enemy right now. We could just crush the base. But typically Amy is in these 1v1s very much on the back foot against players that are turtling, and she's just taking her time. Because sometimes she pushes very early, so I actually, even though she could crush this already, I like her taking her time because, you know, there's no pressure. So the enemy is sitting on this, doing nothing, and she can decide when she's gonna move in. And basically the only way to get back into the game for the enemy would be if Amy would constantly donate reclaim right now, so they could eco up and upgrade maxes, and to some degree, as long as they don't run out of maxes to upgrade to T3, they could still keep up to some degree if Amy doesn't properly eco. So, does Amy actually know that her enemy is on T3 land? She knows. She's having 2.k in the bank. She could just go comfortably T3 herself. She's already ordered it. These engineers should be assisting here as well instead of building more T2 units. Same here, we could use like a bunch of engineers to get the T3 done quicker. And with some T3 and all our T2 army, we should be able to comfortably kill the enemy. So now we'll fast forward this a bit now, because I don't see a way for the enemy to come back. Like being on 32 income and the enemy is just trying to build T2 on and still T1. So basically whenever you, I mean this is just for land, but whenever you reach a higher tech stage, you basically want to cut down on the lower tech. You have, like, apart from a bunch of units, for example, Aeon has access to T2 shields but doesn't have T3 shields. So you want to utilize T2 shields, and Flak, which has an area of effect, could be useful as well against anti-air a bit later in the game, and not just straight away the T3 anti-air. So this is some support stuff you want to build maybe at a lower tech factory. But for anything that is kind of direct fire, you never want to build Auroras when you have access to harps, kind of. That's for sure. So I assume Amy is gonna lose all her T2 units here now, because the enemy is just going for the approach of sending all units towards one side, which is technically not a bad call. Like, if you regain control over this map, you basically have doubled your map control, right? So going for one side and gaining control over that could be very beneficial. We could be, we also get the reclaim if we do this. Enemy is just very scared to push in because of just having one harp in here. If they had sent the 3 harps here as well, it would have been an easy crush against the rhinos. If they actually utilize, which I don't expect at like a 300 or even at Amy's 600 rating, so to utilize the range of the units. Say, with a harp you can just basically attack move and they will utilize their full range and crush the rhinos. And then when they move in, you just need to fall back. So if they outnumber the amount of harps you have with the rhinos, they can still deal some harm to the harps, but as long as you move back, you're kinda safe. So you want to kite and use the range of your units. So somehow we are playing the no intel game. See, and you can tell for Amy, for example, Amy is still building T1 on a factory as well. Amy has rally points in her base, which should never happen. Like, what are you using these units for? They might actually come in handy dealing with those harps here right now, but if the units had been in the front here all the time, she could have just crushed the harps if they engaged her. So now she knows about the harps and moves in with the rhinos and her brick. Even bombing them. Maybe because the bomber just got in range of the harp. Isling the Intis there is not the best idea, but the harps will just be crushed here. So it's free reclaim for Amy basically. Problem is, again, what I said earlier, we decide to move in on all sides now, instead of scouting beforehand. I mean, we scouted apparently, so I can't tell what she actually saw. I mean, I can see to some degree. I don't know why we're engaging with like half our army here, leaving everything here, leaving everything here. This actually gives opportunity to the enemy to win those fights. If you just send your army in like in parts, doesn't matter. If the enemy has only a few units, if you just move in and suicide stuff here, and then move in here, they can swing the units around and still win the fights. If you come from all sides, the enemy simply doesn't have enough to deal with the unit amount the enemy has. And we are idling in front of the base again, partially. Enemy died, so no problem. Engagement was not the best, not gonna lie. She should have probably waited for like 3 or 4 more bricks and then just crushed the whole thing. To play it safe. But it worked in the end, because the enemy blundered the comm. So GG, Emmy won the game.